What's up, everybody? Welcome into LX News. I'm your host, Ashley Hope, joined by two other hosts. You got Marcel, Clark, Nick Z, all for one.
Yes. All right, guys, let's jump right into tonight's show with our top stories of the day.
Yeah, a lot taking place. First, the president has given the green light to a controversial oil drilling project, and the move is drawing fierce opposition from some Alaska Native communities.
But first, we have to start with the story everyone is talking about, and that's the Silicon Valley bank collapse. On Monday, the president assured Americans that the U.S. banking system is, in fact, safe.
Well, Biden's remarks come after another bank was shut down over the weekend. State regulators shut down a New York-based Signature Bank on Sunday. The bank, along with the California-based Silicon Valley Bank, were closed to allow the FDIC to take over those operations. Signature Bank closings amid growing uncertainty about the stability of the banking system. Well, despite both banks shutting down, President Biden says his administration has the situation under control and that all deposits are safe. Now, LX News storyteller Ngozi Ekeledo has more.
Following the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, President Biden addressed the nation first thing Monday morning in an effort to calm worried customers and avoid a bigger financial mess.
Americans can have confidence that the banking system is safe. Your deposits will be there when you need them. Small businesses across the country, the deposit accounts at these banks can breathe easier knowing they'll be able to pay their workers and pay their bills. And their hardworking employees can breathe easier as well.
The president promised that every customer who had money in these banks would get it back in full. He also said that it's not a taxpayer bailout.
This is an important point. No losses will be borne by the taxpayers. Let me repeat that. No losses will be borne by the taxpayers. Instead, the money will come from the fees that banks pay into the deposit insurance fund. Because of the actions that our regulators have already taken, every American should feel confident that their deposits will be there if and when they need them.
Biden added that the management of the banks would be fired, and he promised a full investigation into what happened and changes to reduce the risk of it happening again. Silicon Valley Bank's collapse was notable because the bank was a major financial institution for the tech sector. SVB's collapse also heavily impacted the venture capital and startup space, leaving many in those arenas fearful of their own businesses' collapse. So how did this all happen?
Interest rates went up a lot in a short amount of time, and some banks were caught in a bad position with their underlying investments. And then when a lot of depositors wanted their money all at once, which was because, largely these tech companies weren't doing as well, but also because there was kind of the proverbial shouting fire in a crowded theater, everybody wanted their money back and the bank didn't have it.
Over the weekend, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen appeared on CBS's Face the Nation and spoke about the government's response. She said this isn't a repeat of the 2007-2008 banking crisis, and that while the government would guarantee bank deposits, they are not bailing out investors and management.
Let me be clear that during the financial crisis, there were investors and owners of systemic large banks that were bailed out, and we're certainly not looking, and the reforms that have been put in place means that we're not going to do that again, but we are concerned about depositors and are focused on trying to meet their needs.
Going forward, President Biden said he plans to ask Congress for tougher banking regulations and reforms. Meanwhile, officials in his administration and most analysts are urging calm.
The biggest message for people is that your money is safe, particularly if you're under that $250,000 threshold. Anybody above that, it's probably always a good practice to stay under that threshold. So if you have more money than that in the bank, divide it up between multiple banks, that would be a good strategy.
The unexpected shutdowns of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank have prompted new questions about the level of protection for bank deposits. So you might be wondering, do your deposits have FDIC coverage? And if so, what's covered, what isn't? If you want to know whether your deposits are FDIC insured, you can find out by simply checking your statement. You also may check the FDIC's electronic deposit insurance estimator to see whether your funds are insured at your banking institution and whether any portion exceeds coverage limits. So here's a list of what FDIC insurance does cover. Checking accounts, negotiable order of withdrawal or NOW accounts, savings accounts, and money market deposit accounts, or MMDAs. If you're wondering what isn't covered, things like stock investment, bonds, investments, mutual funds, crypto assets, and life insurance policies, they are all not. You can find a full list, by the way, on the FDIC.gov.
All right, thank you, sir. Now we know a lot of you guys have questions. It's understandable, so let's get some answers for you. Joining me now is Sultan Megji. He's the former Chief Innovation Officer at the FDIC. Sultan, our storyteller in Gezi just a couple minutes ago, explained kind of how we got here, but can you explain, was this either preventable or predictable, maybe both?
Both, actually. So from a preventable perspective, it's really easy. So many of these institutions understand very well what their balance sheets have said and how their investments are doing. And ever since we started to see the economy turn about a year ago, these numbers haven't been lying. It's easy to see. So that's the first part of it. And under the pressure of these raising interest rates, as well as, changes in prices for some of the stocks and some of the loans that these companies have, especially Silicon Valley Bank, entirely seeable. There's another side to this where, not only could we see it happening, but the regulators have all the tools at hand that they could have predicted this. And so I feel like there's a little bit of blame to go on the regulatory side as well.
Okay, and I think, a lot of people, when they hear, banks failing, having to be bailed out, they automatically think 2008. How is this different from 2008?
Oh, it's different in a million different ways. So first off, it's a much smaller number of banks that are impacted, and it's a much narrower set of types of bank customers that are impacted. So these are organizations that are much more concentrated on the startup ecosystem, on venture capital, in a couple of very specific zip codes, if you will. And so, we have this very narrow focus instead of 2008, which was very broad. It was across the entire country. We're looking more kind of on the edge, and we've got a couple more days until we really know. I'm also not, concerned about any of my, bank accounts. I think the U.S. government and the various agencies on Sunday did an incredibly straightforward job and basically said all deposits are insured, so don't worry about it. And I hope more people listen to that and really take a step back and relax just a little bit.
Yeah. Just a second ago, you said that there was kind of blame to go around. The president says that he wants tougher banking regulations in reaction to this kind of moving forward. What does that look like? Is that really a realistic thing to ask for right now? Is it something that you see actually being feasible?
I think it's absolutely going to happen. And probably the first thing that's going to happen is a reversal of something that the Trump administration did, which was to relax some of the Dodd-Frank regulatory requirements on a certain category of banks. I think that's going to get rolled back pretty quickly. I think we're also going to see, under the existing authorities from the FDIC, the OCC, and the Federal Reserve, more examiners looking at things like balance sheet concentration risk and lending risk and equity risk and all the things that we've seen here, and give hopefully a number of these banks a little more direct guidance as to what is and is not appropriate. At some point it would be useful for Congress to get behind this and actually pass some updated laws, with the exception of Dodd-Frank, which came out of the 2008 financial crisis. Most banking regulatory systems in the United States go back almost a century. And so maybe it's time to refresh some of those to understand, something beyond the fax machine.
All right. Well, Sultan Megji, we appreciate you for breaking this down for us, helping us understand what's going on. We appreciate your expertise.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
All good information. Thank you both. Now to our other top story of the day. On Monday, the president opened the country's largest wilderness to energy production when he approved a project for oil drilling in Alaska. The Willow project is a 30-year effort by ConocoPhillips to drill oil in northwestern Alaska. It's also one of President Biden's most controversial moves yet on environmental policy. LX News climate editor Chase Kane explains.
In approving this $8 billion oil project, President Biden reversed course on promises he made during his 2020 campaign and even just a few months ago.
No, I would transition from the oil industry, yes. Oh, I would transition. That is a big statement. That's because I would stop.
Why would you do that?
Because the oil industry pollutes significantly. No more drill oil. There is no more drilling.
ConocoPhillips wanted to open 5 new oil wells on the north slope of Alaska, known as the Willow Project. Now, the administration only approved 3 of the 5, but over the course of about 30 years, this is going to produce more than 600 million barrels of oil. And that would push production past the United States and global goals of zeroing out emissions by 2050. We put this project in context of carbon dioxide emissions in the United States, and this project alone would produce enough oil and eventually carbon dioxide that the United States currently emits in nearly 2 years. 20 months of emissions of carbon dioxide for the United States, again, just from this one project. That's one of the reasons that environmental and climate groups are so upset about it. But to try to appease some of those concerns, President Biden just a day earlier announced that he was going to protect 16 million acres of land and water in Alaska, putting much of it off limits to any future drilling. Now, in a statement, ConocoPhillips said that this was the right decision for Alaska and our nation, adding Willow fits within the Biden administration's priorities on environmental and social justice. They also say it's going to bring in billions of revenue for the federal government and create about 2,500 jobs in Alaska. But again, environmental and climate groups say that's not really the point, because this is essentially making the United States climate goals, the world's climate goals, pushing them even farther out of reach. Because consider this. The carbon dioxide produced from this project, from this Willow Project oil, would be the equivalent of putting about 2 million new gas-powered vehicles on the road every year. That's faster than the current pace of electric vehicle sales, and essentially putting the United States and the world's climate goals even farther out of reach.
Joining us now is Chris Hill, Senior Director of Sierra Club's Our Wild America program. First of all, Chris, thank you so much for the work that you do. We need more people like you doing that kind of work. I want to ask you, Sierra Club tweeted this today. They said that Willow will have devastating effects for our communities, wildlife, and the climate, and went on to say that we will suffer the consequences of this for decades. Can you elaborate?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this time to talk with you today. So, that's correct. Today, the Department of Interior issued a final decision on granting approval to ConocoPhillips' proposed oil and gas operations in the Western Arctic, and this is commonly called the Willow Project. So, under this plan that was approved by the Biden administration, ConocoPhillips will be allowed to develop 3 well pads in one of the largest oil and gas extraction projects in the United States on public lands. It's really unfortunate that this came down the way that it did. You know, we can't drill our way to a sustainable future, and that is exactly what we need moving into how we are dealing with the climate crisis. So it's unfortunate that this decision came down the way it is, and we really need to preserve and conserve more public lands and not sell them off to corporate polluters.
Of course, and Chris, I'm sure somebody from the Biden administration would say, hey, yes, in the perfect world there would be no oil, period, being used. But you mentioned the future. There won't be a future if we don't continue. If we continue to rely on Venezuela, if we continue to rely on Saudi Arabia, we can't just cut off oil altogether. This is somehow better, because at the end of the day, it's going to bring in a lot of money for the federal government. ConocoPhillips, if we take their word for it, says $17 billion in revenue for the federal government. And of course, that comes with more self-reliance. If we learned anything in 2022, it's that, we need self-reliance when it comes to energy.
I hear you on that. I also know that we are in the midst of a climate crisis. We're in the midst of an extinction and climate crisis. And here's the thing about Willow being one of the largest oil and gas extraction areas, projects that we have and will have in the United States right now. Experts say that in order for us to curtail the extinction and climate crisis that we have right now and preserve clean air, clean water, and a stable climate, we need to preserve 50% of the planet's lands and waters by 2050. So what does that mean in the United States? That means protecting 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. We know that in order to combat that climate crisis and really address the climate crisis that we have right now, it's not only curtailing our fossil fuel emissions and moving to clean energy, it's also increasing our nature and preserving our lands and waters in order to be able to preserve 30% of our lands and waters by 2030 here in the United States. Right now, we only have about 12%. And having this project go forward is going to significantly derail that effort and significantly, really have a hard chance for the Biden administration to protect us in the climate crisis and also achieve their climate goals.
It's a very good point, but it's difficult to break free of these vestiges of the past. I mean, Conoco has had a lease on these lands since 1999. If the Biden admin stopped these plans, I'd imagine the company would have a pretty good case in court. But yeah, Chris Hill, you have a point, and beautifully said everything you mentioned there. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stories hit close to home, you need someone that you can turn to.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching LX News. I'm Marcel Clark.
Someone to dig deeper.
What should we take away from that moment? What does this all mean?
You need Marcel Clark. Watch Marcel Clark at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central on LX News.
Welcome back. Troubling images coming from our U.S. Mexico border. This video is from the Paso del Norte International Bridge that connects Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, Texas. On Sunday, a large group of migrants, like you just saw, tried to make several attempts to cross. Many of them were families with children with them.
So on Monday, our Telemundo station in El Paso confirmed the mass entry was sparked by a false rumor that promised to let the migrants, quote, cross massively, particularly people who arrived with children. A spokesperson with the Paso del Norte International Bridge shared physical barriers were set in place to limit the migrants from crossing.
Yeah, although similar attempts took place in 2 other land ports in the area Sunday afternoon, on top of the false rumor, frustration has been growing over the new CBP One mobile app, which is created for migrants to make appointments to make an asylum case. Now, in the video, migrants expressed difficulties with the app and shared how error messages kept popping up. As these issues pile on, pressure has been mounting on the Biden administration as Title 42 is expected to lift come May 11th.
A lot taking place right now at our border, and joining us is Telemundo El Paso reporter Luisa Gonzalez. Luisa, it's now confirmed that this was indeed a false rumor promising entry. So what's being discussed to protect these migrants from false information moving forward?
Marcel, well, thank you so much for having me. And yes, well, there's misinformation which has been spread, and even more with social media. And like you said, it's confirmed that, migrants tried entering the country via the Paso del Norte Bridge yesterday, in which it turned into a protest due to the false rumor about authorities letting migrants, mainly from Venezuela, come into the country. I spoke with El Paso's Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, who said they're talking with Mexican and American authorities to try and prevent this from happening again. They're trying to promote and educate those migrants that are either in shelters or out on the streets about the resources that are available to them, and for them to, apply through the CBP One app and do it in an orderly way.
Yeah, let's talk about those resources, though, because the CBP One app that you just mentioned, in those videos, you can hear those migrants express their frustration with the app. Many of them have expressed issues with them receiving error messages. So what's going to be done to address that at this time?
Well, yeah, CBP did confirm that they're having some technical issues and some glitches, but they are trying to work with that because there's an increase in that demand of applications. They're asking migrants to approve their location services when the application asks them to, because if they don't, it won't let them register. They're also asking for patience from the migrant community so they can keep trying to register and keep doing it in an orderly way.
Yeah. It's been obviously a very frustrating situation for these migrants, because a UN migration official did share that when there are these kind of people removed from the shelters, like we saw in that video, there's no room for them when they come back in this case. So we knew that shelters were at full capacity a few months ago. Where are we at this time?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we did see an increase in migrants in shelters, and that led to the shelters at maximum capacity. Some of those migrants were transported to Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is a 30-minute drive from El Paso, while others did reach their final destination here in the country. And I spoke to others who tried to go into their final destination, but they did not have their documents to present at the CBP checkpoints, and they were expelled back to Mexico.
Final thoughts, because we are almost running out of time. We are now inching closer to that deadline, which is May 11th. What are the concerns? That video, of course, that we're seeing, our viewers are watching right now, very concerning. What's going to be done to our border cities to protect situations from this happening again?
I spoke to local authorities from the city of El Paso who say they're preparing, and they've spoken with the federal government about funding opportunities in case they see that number rise. Mm-hmm. And also they've been talking to non-profit organizations, which are prepared and are taking donations as well as volunteers to help out with this issue. And if that's the case, in the increase of migrants coming in.
Yeah, we're gonna have to wait and see. Luisa Gonzalez again from our Telemundo station out in El Paso. Thank you so much for your time here on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you both. Now let's get into some other stories making headlines. The search for a man who shot 2 police officers in Missouri, killing one of them, ended in an hours-long standoff with police. Police say a 35-year-old man, Kenneth Lee Simpson, started shooting at a convenience store Sunday night.
Detective Sergeant Mason Griffith was shot and killed. Another officer survived the shooting, but was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. Missouri Governor Mike Parson offered his condolences to the fallen officer and his family on Twitter. Now to a disturbing story. Police say a Texas truck driver became obsessed with a woman, killed her and her husband before taking his own life. Police say the 38-year-old truck driver from Texas stalked a 33-year-old woman and her husband who live in Washington state for months.
Now, he met the woman through a chat room app called Clubhouse. Police spent a week trying to serve a protection order, but officers were not able to find the suspect until it was too late. The suspect shot and killed the woman and her husband in their Seattle home. The U.S. is shutting down Iran's claims of a prisoner swap.
So Iran's top diplomat said a prisoner swap was near with the U.S., but there was no evidence to support that. The U.S. dismissed the comments, saying it was, quote, a cruel lie. Iran's foreign minister has made similar comments about possible deals with the U.S. in the past, about frozen assets abroad and others, but none of those deals actually happened. All right, we have some scary moments aboard a United Airlines flight. It was heading from Vermont to New Jersey.
Yeah, listen to the moments. The pilot notified air traffic control about a bomb threat.
The flight attendant just came up and said that passenger found a note that was in the aft lab that said there's a bomb on board.
They sound calm, even in that moment. But about 20 minutes before landing, the pilot was made aware of that threat. It was found inside of a bathroom on the plane. And the pilot told air control officers that the airport in Vermont was closed for several hours as a precaution.
Now, we also know that K-9 units checked the plane. Officials didn't find anything, and luckily no one was hurt.
Powerade is dropping its commercial with Ja Morant.
So the Memphis Grizzlies star had just signed a major endorsement deal with the company and was on his way to becoming the face of the product.
Morant flashed a gun in a Colorado strip club while on Instagram Live. He has since apologized and issued a public statement saying, in part, I'm going to take some time away to get help and work on learning better methods of dealing with stress and my overall well-being.
Now, he's not going to face any criminal charges for that incident. However, the NBA is doing their own investigation. Last week, the Grizzlies said Morant will remain away from the team for at least 4 more games. And good news, if you work in Illinois, you'll soon be granted at least 1 week of paid leave.
Okay, so on Monday, the governor signed the Paid Leave for All Workers Act. It's the 3rd state in the country to mandate paid time off be used for any reason. The bill provides employees with up to 40 hours of paid leave during a 12-month period. Employees can start using the time once they have worked for 90 days. That's about 3 months. But if you haven't started a new job, then you will not reap the benefits of this until next March. All right, that's all we got for your headlines, guys. We'll be right back with more LX News after the break.
You're watching LX News. Coming up next, LX Explains. And later, join Ashley, Marcel, and Nick for more LX News.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. The International Criminal Court wants to open 2 war crime cases over Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's right. The ICC is planning to issue arrest warrants against several people, according to the New York Times. Now, the cases would represent the first international charges to be brought against Russia since the war started more than a year ago.
So the first case will look into Russia allegedly abducting Ukrainian children. The second case will look into Russia targeting civilian infrastructure that includes water supplies and gas tanks. Last month, Ukraine's prosecutor general said regional authorities registered more than 65,000 Russian war crimes since the war began.
And the general added, quote, "These crimes are not incidental or accidental." Experts say that the potential war crimes cross a range of jurisdictions, so the ICC cannot prosecute them or the heads of state, including Russian President Putin.
All right, guys, let's bring in Joel Rubin to weigh in on this. Mr. Rubin is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama. Now, Mr. Rubin, we mentioned it briefly, but I just want to talk to you about the 2 war crime cases that the ICC is looking to open, particularly the first one we mentioned involving the abduction of Ukrainian children and teenagers who were being sent to Russian re-education camps.
Yeah, Nick, this is about as low as it gets when it comes to the treatment of people outside of mass murder, clearly, which is the stealing, the theft of children. And their estimates is up to 16,000 Ukrainian children have been taken and shipped to Russia for re-education, for placement into families, for extortion, God knows what diabolical purpose. But those are the numbers that are being looked at. And this is a definitive crime, stealing children in an armed conflict and shipping them out to a hostile country.
Right. And then the other is that the Kremlin is deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure as well. Joel, what does it mean for the ICC to open a case against Russia? I mean, do we mean Russian military generals? Is it Putin himself?
Well, it could end up at Putin because when we start with Russia, as you're describing, that means that the case now begins, the investigation now begins, the prosecutors now begin to look at all the charges and all the crimes. And what is fascinating about this war is that there is a huge digital footprint available on electronic categories, codes, and storage of data and information and photographs from the past year that will all be handed over by Ukrainians to this prosecutor. And then they'll begin to figure out who the individuals are they should go after. And what's unique about this International Criminal Court is that heads of state are not immune when it comes to war crimes. And so Vladimir Putin could very well be named as somebody that they target.
And one has to wonder what would come of that, you know, when you think back to the early 2000s when former Yugoslavian President Slobodan Milosevic was arrested by the International Criminal Tribunal. He was actually arrested in Belgrade, in the capital of Serbia, by Serbian authorities. Somehow, I don't see Russia turning in their own generals or, of course, obviously Putin as well, unless something very drastic were to happen. So one has to wonder what would even come of this, because sanctions clearly don't seem to be hurting the country economically, at least.
Well, I mean, look, you're bringing up the right point. Like, who knows? Maybe his generals will turn on him if the war continues to go in the direction that it's gone, which is incredibly costly for Russia. There is also the example of Charles Taylor, Liberia, who was a leader there and helped to ensure that, led a genocide basically, and he was taken off the field during transit and travel and arrested and sent to The Hague. So Putin, he may find himself essentially locked into Russia for the rest of his life unless his people turn him over. But one never really knows how this turns out. But leaders have been prosecuted, and Charles Taylor, he's sitting in prison right now.
All right, Joel Rubin, as always, sir, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Nick.
Welcome back into LX News, everybody. There's a question for the crowd here. Do you remember your first car?
I still have it.
Model? You do? Wait, you too?
No, I got the minivan.
You had to drive the minivan?
I got the minivan, but there was a VCR player in the back. Balling.
Oh.
What about you?
That. Was it a red Lexus something? I can't remember all the letters.
Lexus. Ooh.
Well, it was an old one. Don't do that. Anyway, most of us could not wait to get our hands on driver's licenses, no matter what car it was, and finally being able to go places without mom or dad dropping us off. But that does not seem to be the case for Gen Z.
That's right. Data from the Federal Highway Administration shows that Gen Zers are getting their driver's licenses at lower rates than previous generations. We'll take a look at these numbers. In 1997, 43% of 16-year-olds and 62% of 17-year-olds had their licenses. In 2020, those numbers were down to 25% and 45%.
What do you think this is, Europe? You think it's public transportation? Get a car! Sorry. On the flip side, baby boomers are driving more than before. Data shows in 1997, 43% of people 85 and older had driver's license, and in 2020, that number jumped to 59%.
But should they be driving?
That's a different discussion.
Please, get a Gen Z to drive you.
I'm giving you the numbers. I need to extrapolate here.
Anyway, LX News storyteller Cody Broadway looks at the changing landscape of American transportation.
In 1997, almost 90% of 20-25-year-olds had driver licenses. But in 2020, that number dropped to only 80%.
Congratulations, here's your license. And please, drive safely.
For many years, getting your driver license was a rite of passage, a symbol of freedom and independence.
You get your driver's license right away?
The day I turned 16, I got my learner's permit.
Immediately.
Boom, right.
So did I.
Yeah. But times have changed. Today, younger generations are choosing to delay that process.
I got my driver's license at 19 years old, and I guess the reason why I chose to get it so late is because I always had public access to buses, transportation, that kind of thing. And my job at the time, I was working at Subway, which was about a probably 10-minute walk from the school.
With the cost, stress, and environmental concerns, many are opting for alternative modes of transportation, like EV, scooters, bikes, and public transportation.
And I guess I kind of discovered what I really wanted and what really worked for my schedule. And being a student the whole time, I quickly realized that driving was fun because it was just that excitement, you know, the thrill of having a car. But it wasn't very practical. It was expensive. You know, you're talking car insurance, gas, parking. And in my case on campus, it just wasn't realistic for me to buy a parking permit, and like the expenses weren't really in the cards for me.
According to experts, adult millennials continue to drive about 8% less every day than members of Generation X and baby boomers.
On average, they drove about 8% less than Generation X. It's different from some people suggest, well, once they form families, if they become older, they will drive more. But in our study, we showed it's kind of like almost consistent, less VMT on average per person.
Majority of Gen Zers and millennials favor phasing out new gasoline cars and trucks by year 2035. But by contrast, majority of Gen X and baby boomers and older adults oppose this idea.
Mass transportation is not an option for me, or biking to work. It's more of I needed to still have a vehicle to get to and from, but I wanted something that was more aligned with my goals as a consumer. I do have a responsibility at the end of the day, right? I am by no means a scientist or an environmental specialist, but I do feel like there is a direct impact, a positive impact on the emissions component of EVs versus your typical ICE engines, right? Which is your ignition combustion engine. For me, it's the performance as well, the technology, but most importantly, the safety component.
Some cities like San Antonio, Texas are working towards a future that is less reliant on traditional cars.
Office of Sustainability has a climate action and adaptation plan that was adopted by City Council in 2019, and the overall goal is to reduce emissions and meet carbon neutrality by 2050. So my job is to meet that goal through transportation initiatives.
The pressure is on for cities around the country to start thinking about ways to change the way we see commuting and driving.
I think it says that the younger generations really care about these issues, whether it be about transportation safety or transportation emissions. They're aware and they want to make these decisions. And that also leads the way that our projects work. If we have a younger generation that isn't interested in buying cars, they're interested in only owning bicycles, that's great. Then we need to up our bike infrastructure. So I think it's great that the younger generation is really seeking this change, because if we can kind of enact change, if you never buy your first vehicle, or if your first vehicle is an electric vehicle, it's very unlikely that you're going to kind of regress and buy a gas guzzling vehicle instead. So it's really great to see it. It's great to have that pressure on the city to meet these needs.
As we've seen, there's a shift happening in the way we commute and by the way we think about driving. Younger generations are waiting longer to get their driver license due to the cost, stress, and environmental concerns.
You know, I don't have to pay for parking. I got this free option to ride the bus.
I didn't take into consideration the price of gas at the time, like just knowing how expensive that was going to be.
And at the same time, older generations are holding onto their sense of freedom and independence that comes with driving. In the end, we all have a role to play in creating a better future for ourselves and the planet.
We need definitely buy-in from all generations, because essentially alternative methods of transportation will be more prominent as we move along in society.
It's up to each and every one of us to rethink how we move around our cities and embrace alternative modes of transportation. Whether it's EVs, biking, or taking public transit, we all contribute to a cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable future.
Stories hit close to home, you need someone that you can turn to.
I'm JoBeth DeVera, and you're watching the LX News Zone.
Someone to make sense of it all.
What do people need to know right now? I'm going to break it down for you.
Watch JoBeth DeVera at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central in the LX News Zone.
Hey friends, welcome back to the show. Ashley, Marcella, and Nick with you. Now, I know everyone's still talking about the biggest night of film and television, of course, talking about the Oscars. And,
At LX News. I was tuned in very much, and we will definitely break down all the highlights for you coming up in a few minutes, but some other entertainment news is making waves.
Yeah, so because one of the biggest rap stars out there, Aubrey Graham, you might know him as Drake, Champagne Poppy, if you're on Insta, he's going on tour. The tour is called It's All a Blur, honey. We've all been there. And it will kick off this summer in New Orleans, of all places, starting June 16th. There are close to 30 dates with stops in 19 U.S. cities and, of course, a few stops in Canada. Drake will be joined on tour by 21 Savage to perform hits from their collab album, Her Loss. His last tour was in 2018 with the Migos, so wow. So this tour is bound to sell out. Of course, tickets go on sale to the general public this Friday. Now, I do have to tell you guys about an effort to recognize what one advocate, though, is calling generous Samaritans. Are you ready for this? A woman in South Florida, so you already know, went before the Boca Raton Planning and Zoning Board and asked to designate March 10th a special day. This is not me, caveat, but just watch it.
Okay.
Requesting that you decree a Sugar Daddy and Mommy Appreciation Day on March 10th to honor those who have given us so much.
That's just okay, it is me. Sorry. So she laid out her arguments, people, claiming that Florida has one of the largest populations of sugar daddies and sugar parents, which I've never heard of, but that's sugar daddies and mommies, don't discriminate. They benefit the local economy by buying clothes, bags, cars, paying bills, okay? We enjoy all those things.
So
but look,
true.
I'm not gonna say whether or not her proposal is wrong. Nobody asked me personally, but she did propose it to the wrong people. A board member thanked her for her comments and kindly reminded her, me, whoever it is, that it's really an issue for the city council. So we'll see if she readjusts and makes the arguments to the right
How do they
people.
get that kind of data? Like Florida has the most sugar daddies of.
I don't know. I think it's just in.
It's just
they don't know
census, the
out there.
2020
They don't know.
census.
Yeah.
And that was one of the boxes I remember. Okay.
Well, it's hard to follow up on that story, but there's always a need for more organ donors. We hear about wait lists all the time, and the shortage is global. New specialists in Japan are setting up the country's first heart transplant society to tackle on the issue. They want to establish a law that will mandate hospitals to report to the government when a patient is diagnosed with brain death. Right now, 900 patients are currently on the wait list for a heart transplant in Japan, but only around 100 surgeries are carried out annually due to lack of donors and other factors. That group wants to have this protocol in place by April of next year to streamline the surgery process. March Madness begins this week, but if you ask the people out in Philly, some of them are calling it March Sadness. Now, for the first time in over 40 years, no Philadelphia teams are in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. The bracket featuring 68 teams was announced over the weekend. Now, it's the first time since 1977 that no local men's team has been included. But the Villanova's women's basketball team is bringing the girl power. They play in the NCAA women's bracket against Cleveland State this Saturday.
There it is.
All right, they're holding it down for all of Philadelphia. All eyes on them. Okay, there's a lot of hype around March Madness, of course, but as mentioned, obviously some disappointment from teams that don't hit the court. Sports producer Brad Foster breaks down the math to show us what the competition would look like if all eligible teams made the cut.
I've got coffee. Every year people talk about expanding the NCAA tournament, but what if we took it to the extreme and included every eligible team? So that's what I'm going to do this week. First, we have to figure out what that bracket, I guess, would look like. It seems insane. Let's find this year's bracket. All right, so we have to turn this into a lot more teams. So let's figure out how many, 363, and 352 will be eligible. Congratulations to all 352 eligible D1 teams. You just made the tournament, and we're gonna do 352 divided by 2 to find 176. So that's gonna be each side of the bracket. Okay, so I already found a bracket online. We need to add quite a bit to this. I realize there's probably an easier way to do this. I just don't know how. That looks good. Wowza. It's a lot of teams, but we're not even done yet. There's still more that we have to add. 352. All right, so 352 team March Madness, not doing a first four. We've got our bracket. Let's figure out the number of venues we need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So there's 14 for the current 68 teams. That's a lot more sites. That many locations means we need some new options, so let's venture out. Congratulations to Sacramento State, you get a game. Charleston Southern, you get a game. My old high school, why not host a game there? One thing we have to be careful about when we're talking about college sports are the NCAA rules for college athletes. Let's figure out the hours restrictions for athletes, because I know that there's some restrictions on that. 4 hours per day and 20 hours per week. I am completely lost here. This year's tournament has 67 games played in it, and we're taking that a lot farther because we have 300 and however many teams, 352. We have to play 303 games. Hold on, clearly math is not my strong suit. We need to play 351 games, not 303. Yikes. So in lieu of playing 10 games every single day for 31 days, we're just gonna make it Spring Madness and go from March 1st to April 30th. So that's over 61 days. We can do 303 divided by 61 days, about 5 games every day for 2 whole months. Okay, so let's recap. We have a 351 game tournament played over 61 days. So we have to rename it Spring Madness because it's no longer just March. It starts with the first 48 instead of the first 4. We have to play it at about 73 different venues. So this is going to be madness. But that's what March Madness is about, right? Drama, buzzer beaters, and upsets. In the current format, there are on average about 13 upsets per tournament. You have a 352 team Spring Madness, you could get almost 60 upsets during that tournament. Who could turn that down?
You're watching LX News. Coming up next, LX Explains. And later, join Ashley, Marcel, and Nick for more LX News.
Welcome back. 24 hours later, and the Oscars are still a hot topic.
Yes, if you missed it, here's a quick little rundown.
Yes, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once dominated the night, scooping up 7 wins, including Best Picture. Michelle Yeoh, who stars in the film, became the first Asian woman to win Best Actress.
All right, Jamie Lee Curtis won Best Supporting Actress for her role in Everything Everywhere All at Once. Some fans on Twitter pointed out Angela Bassett's reaction, who appeared to be disappointed, of course.
So was Ashley Holt. However, Jamie Lee Curtis's fellow castmate, Ke Huy Quan, won Best Supporting Actor and was overcome with all the feels in the historic moment.
My mom is 84 years old, and she's at home watching. Mom, I just want an Oscar.
Love that moment. Brendan Fraser's career comeback was complete, taking home Best Actor for his role in The Whale.
Yes, Lady Gaga went au naturel with no makeup, wearing a simple tee for her performance of Hold My Hand from Top Gun Maverick. And fresh from the Super Bowl, Rihanna and her baby bump took center stage to perform Lift Me Up.
But in the end, Best Song went to Natu Natu from the Indian blockbuster RRR, or RR. It's the first song from an Indian film to be nominated and win in this category. Another historic Oscars moment, costume designer Ruth Carter has become the first black woman to win 2 Oscars. She won both Oscars for her work in the Black Panther franchise. She also took home 1 award last night and the other in 2019. The Oscar was pretty calm. The Oscars were pretty calm and peaceful, you could say, compared to last year.
Yeah, we'll take that, but of course we may have a new meme thanks to Andrew Garfield. Check this one out.
And if any of you get mad at a joke and decide you want to come up here and get jiggy with it, it's not going to be easy. There are a few of my friends you're going to have to get through first. You're going to have to get through the heavyweight champ, Adonis Creed, before you get to me. You're going to have to do battle with Michelle Yeoh before you get to me. You are going to have to beat the Mandalorian before you get to me. You are going to have to tangle with Spider-Man. You are going to have to...
Is that his tough face?
Spider-Man was like, not me, no thanks.
All right, of course, we cannot forget the glam of the night. Instead of stars strutting down the red carpet, the Oscars broke tradition for the very first time in 60 years and went with a beige, sort of champagne-colored carpet. Check it out.
All right, everyone, so here to share his take on the fashion hits and misses. It is the fashion misses of this house, Derek Z of Lux Life with Derek Z. All right, Derek, we got to start with everyone that you liked. So first up, Nicole Kidman, what did you like about her look?
Listen, I love someone that makes a statement on the red carpet. You're seeing this right now. I mean, talk about fabulous luxe. She was in Armani Privé. I mean, look at that floral arrangement, not only on the shoulder, but kind of mid-dress. Then we got a leg moment. Ashley, you know I love a leg moment.
I do.
And I think the hair was simple, but still made a statement on the red carpet. The glam was kind of, I would say, muted, but a big lash made that dress pop. Wasn't a lot of jewelry. Nicole Kidman, you did good, I think.
Her dress is giving the same thing your shirt's giving.
I was going to say, we got the florals
it's the same
going.
vibe.
Yes. It's in season. All right, this is, of course, one of our favorites. Next, we had Rihanna, who showed up in that bucket hat, a T-shirt, and a pair of kicks. But, of course, she glammed up. What did you think of her outfit?
Listen, I loved it. I love the cutouts on the side. Now, Alaya is an amazing designer. We always see that this fashion house shows up, has unique designs. Now, Rihanna, you know, we saw her at the Super Bowl. She was showing us out, and then she's owning this pregnancy look, which is incredible. And I love the train on the dress. We're seeing a lot of black on the red carpet. A lot of stars went with that kind of color, which I'm a fan of. I'm not a fan of, but for her, definitely a fan of this look. And I love a train, and she just looks so happy. Don't you guys think?
Yeah, she's killing this pregnancy. It's like all her peak moments.
100%. And I love that the carpet wasn't red. I think it made the dress pop more. I might be in the minority on that, but yeah.
All right, Derek, what do we have to say about Cate Blanchett in the Louis V?
Okay, you know, Nick, I love Louis Vuitton. It's my middle name. I have backpacks all over the place. And listen, she showed up because she didn't wear a normal type of dress on this red carpet. It was oversized, which we're seeing a trend this season with all these different collections, these different carpets. People are taking risks and not doing the fitted look. Now that blouse, silk, and the skirt was fabulous. I liked how it, once again, there was a train on it. And I love a pop of color. I wish more people did a pop of color. and her hair obviously looked great pulled back with those basic earrings. I mean, she did show up, guys.
Yeah. I like those oversized dresses because you can eat and be comfortable.
I was
going to
say it's giving pajama, and on a Friday night, she went straight from the carpet to bed. I understand completely. Okay, now it was Michelle Yeoh's night, if we have to be honest. So she showed up before she knew it was her night in Dior. You loved that one too.
Yes, you know, she brought home Best Actress. Congratulations. Now, check out this white number. It looks a little bit like a wedding dress, but she owned it, and it was kind of flowy, like we're seeing. Not a fitted look again. People are taking the risk on the carpet. Now, it was not only Dior, but it was Dior Haute Couture.
Okay.
So, very special collection for Dior. I've been to a lot of their runway shows in Paris, especially the Haute Couture shows, and these are such unique, one-of-a-kind pieces, and I'm happy that she rocked it on the red carpet, and she looked just so happy before getting the award, and then also at the after parties, too.
Now let's put the spotlight on the men. It's time for a change up.
Finally.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. What do we think about his fit?
Okay, Ashley, I've always been talking to Ashley on this show, but she knows that I love a jacket moment.
Yes.
Yes. Hello. Talk about pink, and I love color. So pink, like that silky, shiny look with those black pants, and of course that black bow tie. Looking fabulous, looking very sharp. I wish more men would take a chance in wearing color, wearing something that's going to make them stand out in a room. As I can guarantee you, of course, he's Dwayne Rock the Johnson, but when he walked into the room, everyone was talking about his look, his jacket. Listen, one piece that you have in your closet that you're scared to wear, I want you to put it on and rock and roll, because I'm pretty sure he was not scared. So just go for it, people. If you ever, this jacket always can dress up a look in a pop of color and a silk. Ooh, it does it for me.
Oof.
Well, you look that good. I mean, everything looks
Wear
great.
whatever you want.
So, yeah,
I don't care.
So.
All right, Derek Z, as always, thank you so much for blessing us with your presence. We appreciate you. Yeah. All right, y'all. We'll see you later. Good night.